Clara Sutton dropped to her knees in the dirt outside the train station, her fingers digging into the dust like she could hold on to something, anything that wouldn't abandon her. The man who promised her a home had just ridden away without looking back. 2,000 miles from Philadelphia. No money, no ticket home, and a whole town watching her fall apart in the summer heat. But sometimes the worst day of your life leads you exactly where you belong. If you want to see how Clara finds her way, subscribe to our channel and follow her story to the very end. Comment your city below. I want to see how far this journey travels. Clara Sutton had rehearsed this moment for 2,000 miles. She would step off the train, graceful and composed. She would smile at Judge Harlan Cobb, the man whose letters had painted pictures of a grand house, a respectable life, a future worth believing in. She would say something clever, something that proved she was worth every penny of that train ticket. She had not rehearsed standing alone on a wooden platform while the man who sent for her rode away in a cloud of dust. "Ma'am?" The station master's voice came from somewhere behind her. Clara didn't turn. She couldn't. If she moved, she might shatter into 1,000 pieces right there on the platform. "Ma'am, you can't stay here. Station closes at sundown." Clara finally turned. The station master was a thin man with kind eyes and nervous hands. He kept looking toward the road where Judge Cobb had disappeared. "He left," Clara said. The words felt foreign in her mouth. "Yes, ma'am. I saw." "He didn't even speak to me." The station master shifted his weight. "No, ma'am. He looked at you, and he left." Clara's hands trembled. She pressed them flat against her skirt to stop the shaking. "Did he say anything? Leave any message?" "Just one thing, ma'am." The man pulled a folded paper from his pocket. "He said to give you this." Clara took the paper. Her fingers left dust marks on the edges. She unfolded it slowly, and the words hit her like a fist to the chest. "I have received word from Philadelphia regarding your character. The arrangement is terminated. This should cover coach fare back east. H. Cobb." Inside the fold, 3 crumpled bills. "Not enough for a ticket home. Not even close." "How much is fare to Philadelphia?" Clara asked. The station master winced. "More than that, ma'am. A good deal more." Clara stared at the money in her hand. 3 months ago, she had sold everything she owned. Her mother's piano, her books, her grandmother's ring. She had packed 1 carpet bag and boarded a train, believing she was heading toward a new beginning. Now she stood in a Texas cattle town with nothing but lies in her pocket and dust in her lungs. "Is there a hotel?" she asked. "A boarding house. There's the Holloway house 2 blocks east." "But ma'am." The station master hesitated. "Judge Cobb owns half this town. If he's turned you away, most folks won't cross him." Clara lifted her chin. She had survived worse than a small-town tyrant. She had survived Philadelphia. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. She picked up her carpet bag and walked into the blazing afternoon sun. The heat was a living thing. Clara had never felt anything like it. Philadelphia summers were humid and heavy, but this was different. This was dry fire pressing against her skin, stealing moisture from her lips, turning her throat to sandpaper. She walked 2 blocks east. Her dress, which had seemed perfectly appropriate when she left Pennsylvania, now felt like a wool blanket wrapped around her body. Sweat trickled down her spine. The Holloway house was a 2-story building with a wide porch and faded white paint. A woman sat in a rocking chair fanning herself with a folded newspaper. She was perhaps 55 with gray-streaked hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Help you," the woman called. Clara stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. "I'm looking for a room." "Most folks are." The woman stopped rocking. "What's your name?" "Clara Sutton. I just arrived from Philadelphia." "The mail-order bride." Clara felt her face flush. "Word travels fast." "Honey, word travels faster than lightning in a town this size." The woman stood, tucking the newspaper under her arm. "I'm Ruth Holloway. This is my place." "I have money for a room," Clara said quickly. "Not much, but—" "I know exactly how much you have," Ruth interrupted. "I also know Judge Cobb told every business owner in this town not to help you." Clara's stomach dropped. "Then why are you talking to me?" Ruth smiled, and there was something fierce in it. "Because I don't take orders from Harlan Cobb. Never have, never will." She gestured toward the door. "Come inside before you melt into a puddle on my steps." The inside of the boarding house was cooler, though not by much. Ruth led Clara to a small parlor and handed her a glass of water. "Drink slow," Ruth warned. "You're not used to this heat. Drink too fast, you'll make yourself sick." Clara sipped carefully. The water was lukewarm, but felt like heaven. "Now," Ruth said, settling into a chair across from her. "Tell me what really happened at that station." Clara told her. The letters, the promises, the 3-month journey. The moment she stepped off the train and saw Judge Cobb's face twist with disgust before he turned and rode away. "He said he received word from Philadelphia about my character," Clara finished. "He didn't tell me what word. He didn't let me explain." Ruth studied her for a long moment. "Is there something to explain?" Clara met her eyes. "There was a scandal at the school where I taught. The headmaster accused me of theft. I was innocent, but by the time the truth came out, my reputation was destroyed. No school would hire me. No family would employ me as a governess. I had nothing left." "So you answered an advertisement for a mail-order bride." "I answered a chance at a new life." Clara's voice cracked. "I was a fool." Ruth shook her head. "You were desperate. There's a difference." She stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dusty street. "Judge Cobb isn't just a rancher, Miss Sutton. He's the most powerful man in this county. He owns the bank, half the businesses, and most of the water rights. People depend on him for their livelihoods. So no one will help me." "I didn't say that." Ruth turned back. "I said people depend on him. Doesn't mean they like him." She paused. "You can stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." "I can work," Clara said immediately. "I can cook, clean, mend. I taught piano and French. I can do sums and keep ledgers. I'm not helpless." Ruth's expression softened. "I can see that, but there's no work in this town for a woman Judge Cobb has marked. You need to find something outside his reach." "What's outside his reach in a place like this?" Ruth smiled again, that same fierce smile. "More than you'd think." Clara slept poorly that night. The heat didn't break after sunset. It simply shifted, becoming thick and heavy instead of sharp and biting. She lay on top of the thin blanket Ruth had provided, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of the town settling into darkness. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Judge Cobb's face. The way he'd looked at her, like she was something dirty he'd found on his boot. She had seen that look before, in Philadelphia after the scandal broke. People she had known for years looking at her like she was a stranger, a criminal, something to be avoided. She had thought she could escape that look by coming west. She had thought 2,000 miles was far enough to outrun shame. She had been wrong. Morning came brutal and bright. Clara dressed carefully, choosing her lightest dress despite its wrinkles. She braided her hair and pinned it up, trying to look respectable, trying to look like someone worth taking a chance on. Ruth was already in the kitchen when Clara came downstairs. "Eat," Ruth said, sliding a plate of biscuits across the table. "You'll need your strength." "For what?" "For convincing Silas Beckham to hire you." Clara paused biscuit halfway to her mouth. "Who?" "Rancher. Lives about 5 miles north of town. Good man, keeps to himself mostly." Ruth poured 2 cups of coffee. "His place isn't inside Judge Cobb's reach. Silas doesn't owe Cobb money, doesn't use his water, doesn't answer to him in any way. And you think he'll hire me? I think it's roundup season, and every rancher in the county is desperate for extra hands. Silas lost 2 workers last month, one to a broken leg, one to a better offer in Arizona. Ruth sat down across from her. He needs someone who can cook for the crew, keep the books, maybe help with the lighter work. You can do all that. Clara set down her biscuit. Why are you helping me? You don't know me. Ruth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was different, softer. I came to Texas as a mail-order bride 30 years ago, she said. Man who sent for me was nothing like his letters. Mean, drunk, heavy hands. I stayed 3 years before I found the courage to leave. She met Clara's eyes. Someone helped me back then. A stranger who had no reason to care. I've been trying to repay that kindness ever since. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Ruth said. Silas Beckham isn't an easy man. He's been alone since his wife died, and he likes it that way. Convincing him to let a strange woman stay on his property won't be simple. I can be convincing, Ruth smiled. I believe you can. The walk to Silas Beckham's ranch took nearly 2 hours in the morning heat. Ruth had drawn her a map and loaned her a canteen. Clara walked along the dusty road, watching the landscape stretch out around her in shades of brown and gold. It was nothing like Pennsylvania. Nothing like anything she had ever seen. It was beautiful in a harsh, unforgiving way. She found the ranch just before noon. A sturdy house sat at the center of the property, surrounded by a barn, a corral full of horses, and several smaller outbuildings. Everything looked well-maintained but worn. Practical, not pretty. A young man was working in the corral trying to calm a skittish mare. He couldn't have been more than 16, with straw-colored hair and a face full of freckles. "Excuse me," Clara called. The boy looked up, startled. His eyes went wide when he saw her. "Ma'am?" "I'm looking for Mr. Silas Beckham. Is he here?" The boy's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. "Yes, ma'am. He's in the barn. Should I fetch him?" "Please." The boy scrambled over the corral fence and ran toward the barn like the devil himself was chasing him. Clara waited, her heart pounding harder than the heat could explain. A few minutes later, a man emerged from the barn. He was tall. That was the first thing she noticed. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that was starting to gray at the temples. His face was weathered by sun and wind, with deep lines around his eyes and a small scar on his chin. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man who had learned to measure his steps. He stopped about 10 feet away from her and removed his hat. "Ma'am?" "Mr. Beckham." "That's right." His eyes traveled over her, not rudely, but assessing, taking stock. "Pete says you're looking for me." "I am." Clara straightened her spine. "My name is Clara Sutton. I understand you're short-handed for roundup season." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. "Word travels fast." "Mrs. Holloway told me." "Ruth sent you." It wasn't a question. He put his hat back on. "What exactly did she tell you?" "That you need someone to cook for your crew, keep your books, and help with whatever needs doing." Clara met his eyes steadily. "I can do all of that. You don't look like you've done a day of ranch work in your life." "I haven't," Clara admitted. "But I learn fast, I work hard, and I don't complain." Silas studied her for a long moment. His expression gave nothing away. "You're the woman Judge Cobb sent away," he said finally. "The mail-order bride." Clara felt her face heat. "Yes." "Why'd he send you away?" "He said he received word about my character from Philadelphia. He didn't specify what word." "And what would that word be if he had specified?" Clara took a breath. This was the moment. The test. She could lie and vent some innocent explanation. Or she could tell the truth and watch another door close in her face. She was so tired of lies. "I was a teacher at a girls' school. she said. "The headmaster accused me of stealing from the school funds. I was innocent, but by the time that was proven, the damage was done. No one would hire me. No one would associate with me. I came west to escape that scandal." She lifted her chin. "That's the truth, Mr. Beckham. You can believe it or not." Silas said nothing. His face remained unreadable. The silence stretched so long that Clara began to turn away. She had been foolish to hope. "Can you cook for 8 men?" Silas asked. Clara stopped. "Yes." "Can you keep a ledger without making a mess of the numbers?" "I taught mathematics to schoolgirls for 6 years. Yes, I can keep a ledger." "Can you wake before dawn and work until after sunset without complaining?" "I can." Silas nodded slowly. "Pay is room board and $2 a week. You'll sleep in the back room of the house. Door has a lock and you'll keep the key. Work starts at 4 in the morning and ends when the work is done. Roundup lasts 3 weeks, maybe 4. After that, we'll see." Clara blinked. You're hiring me?" "Appears so." "Just like that. You don't want references. You don't want to ask around." Silas's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes shifted, almost like amusement buried very deep. "I've been lied to by enough people with good references to know they don't mean much. Besides," he paused, "Ruth Holloway doesn't vouch for people lightly. If she sent you here, you're worth taking a chance on." Clara felt something loosen in her chest. Something that had been wound tight for months, maybe years. "Thank you," she said. "You won't regret this." "Probably will," Silas said. "But I've regretted worse." He turned toward the barn. "Pete, show Miss Sutton to the house. She's staying." The freckled boy appeared from behind the corral, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. "Yes, sir." He scrambled toward Clara, nearly tripping over his own feet. "This way, ma'am. I'll carry your bag." Clara handed him the carpet bag, and he clutched it to his chest like it contained gold. "I'm Pete," he said as they walked toward the house. "I work for Mr. Beckham. Have for 2 years now. He's a good man. Quiet, but good. You'll like it here, I think. It's hard work, but honest work, and the food is—" He made a face. "Well, the food will be better now that you're here, I reckon." Clara smiled despite everything. Despite the heat and the dust and the ache in her feet. Despite Judge Cobb and Philadelphia and all the doors that had slammed in her face. "I'll do my best," she said. "That's all anyone can do, ma'am." Pete pushed open the door to the house. "That's all any of us ever do." The house was simple but clean. A main room served as kitchen, dining area, and sitting space. A stone fireplace dominated one wall, cold now in the summer heat, but well maintained. A long wooden table stood in the center, scarred by years of use. 2 doors led off the main room. Pete pointed to the one on the left. "That's Mr. Beckham's room. The one on the right is for you." He set her carpet bag down carefully. "There's a pump out back for water and a privy past the barn. Supper's usually at 6, but during roundup, it's whenever the men come in from the range." Clara walked to her door and pushed it open. The room was small but private. A narrow bed, a wooden chair, a small table with a basin and pitcher. A single window let in the afternoon light. It was nothing like her room in Philadelphia. Nothing like the grand house Judge Cobb had promised in his letters. It was perfect. "Thank you, Pete," she said. The boy ducked his head, suddenly shy. "If you need anything, just holler. I'm usually around somewhere." He left, and Clara sat down on the bed. The mattress was thin, but not uncomfortable. She pressed her hands flat against it, feeling the rough fabric beneath her palms. 24 hours ago, she had believed her life was over. Now she was sitting in a stranger's house, hired for a job she had never done in a place she had never been. And for the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. Supper that night was an education. 8 ranch hands crowded around the long table, shoveling food into their mouths like men who hadn't eaten in days. They ranged in age from Pete's 16 to a grizzled old man named Gus, who had to be at least 60. Silas sat at the head of the table, eating quietly, watching everything. Clara had done her best with what she found in the pantry. Beans, salt, pork, cornbread. Nothing fancy, but plenty of it. "This is good, ma'am," one of the hands said. He was young, maybe 20, with a sunburned face and earnest eyes. "Real good." "Better than what we've been eating," Gus muttered. "Sorry, boss, but it's true. Your cooking could kill a man." A few of the hands laughed. Silas didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. "That's why I hired Miss Sutton," he said, "so I don't have to poison anyone else." More laughter. Clara felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. After supper, the hands drifted off to the bunkhouse. Pete stayed to help Clara clean up, chattering happily about horses and cattle and the upcoming roundup. His enthusiasm was infectious. "How long have you worked here?" Clara asked as she scrubbed a pot. 2 years, ma'am. Mr. Beckham took me in when I didn't have nowhere else to go." Pete dried a plate carefully. "My folks died when I was 14. Fever took 'em both in 1 week. I was living rough when Mr. Beckham found me. He gave me a job, a bed, a purpose." He shrugged. "He don't say much, but he's the best man I know." Clara glanced toward the closed door of Silas's room. She could see a thin line of lamplight beneath it. "Mrs. Holloway mentioned he lost his wife," she said carefully. Pete's face shadowed. "Yes, ma'am. Mrs. Beckham. She was real nice from what the old hands say. I never met her myself. She died 5 years ago having a baby. Baby died too." He shook his head. "Mr. Beckham don't talk about it. Ever. But you can see it sometimes. The hurt he carries." Clara understood that kind of hurt, the kind that lived in your bones. "I won't mention it to him," she said quietly. "That's probably best, ma'am." Pete set down his dish towel. "I should get to the bunkhouse. Morning comes early around here." "Thank you for your help, Pete." "Any time, ma'am." He grinned. "I'm glad you're here. It's nice having someone new around. Gets lonesome sometimes." He left, and Clara finished the last of the dishes alone. The house was quiet now, the kind of deep silence she wasn't used to. In Philadelphia, there had always been noise. Traffic voices, the clatter of city life. Here there was only the wind and the distant sound of horses in the corral. Clara dried her hands and walked to the window. The sky was vast and dark, filled with more stars than she had ever seen. It looked like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. She stood there for a long time watching the night. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Tomorrow, she would have to prove herself all over again. But tonight, just for a moment, she allowed herself to feel something like peace. She didn't hear the door open. "Miss Sutton," Clara turned. Silas stood in the doorway of his room, lamplight spilling around him. "Mr. Beckham? I'm sorry, I was just—" "No need to apologize." He stepped into the main room, leaving his door open behind him. "Just wanted to make sure you had everything you need." "I do. Thank you." He nodded but didn't leave. Instead, he moved to the table and sat down in one of the chairs. He looked tired, Clara realized. Not just physically tired, but bone-deep weary. "Ruth told you about my wife," he said. It wasn't a question. Clara hesitated. "She mentioned it, yes. I'm sorry for your loss." Silas was quiet for a moment. "It was 5 years ago. Long time." He stared at his hands on the table. "I don't talk about her. Not because I don't care. Because some things are too big for words." "I understand," Clara said softly. He looked up at her. "Do you?" "I've lost things too, Mr. Beckham. Not a spouse, not a child. But I know what it feels like when the world you knew disappears and you have to build something new from the ashes." Silas studied her face for a long moment. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy him. "Get some sleep," he said, rising from the chair. "Tomorrow will be long." "Mr. Beckham," he paused at his door. "Why did you really hire me?" Clara asked. a stranger with a scandal attached to her name. You didn't have to take that risk. Silas didn't turn around, but his voice when he spoke was quiet and certain. Because I know what it looks like when someone's been wrongly judged, and I know what it costs to start over with nothing. He glanced back at her just once. Everyone deserves a second chance, Miss Sutton, even people the world has given up on. He went into his room and closed the door. Clara stood alone in the dark kitchen, her heart beating strangely in her chest. She had come to Texas looking for a safe haven, a place to hide from her past. But standing here in this quiet house, in this vast and empty land, she had the strange feeling that she had found something else entirely, something she wasn't ready to name. Not yet. Clara woke before the rooster crowed. She lay still for a moment, disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling above her. Then memory flooded back. Texas, the ranch, Silas Beckham's quiet words about second chances. She was out of bed and dressed before the first hint of light touched the horizon. The kitchen was dark when she entered it. She felt her way to the stove, found matches, and started the fire. By the time footsteps sounded on the porch, she had biscuits in the oven and coffee boiling. The door opened. Silas stopped in the doorway. "You're up early," he said. "You said work starts at 4. Something flickered across his face. Not quite a smile, but close. "Most folks need a few days to adjust. I'm not most folks." He studied her for a moment, then nodded once and went to the table. Clara poured him coffee without being asked. Their fingers brushed as he took the cup. Neither mentioned it. "The hands will be here soon," Silas said. "They eat fast and leave faster during roundup." "I'll be ready." She was. When the ranch hands filed in 20 minutes later, the table was loaded with biscuits, bacon, eggs, and gravy. The men stopped in the doorway, staring. "Lord have mercy," Gus breathed. "Is this heaven?" "Sit down and eat," Clara said. "Food's getting cold." They didn't need to be told twice. Clara watched them devour everything she'd made. She'd cooked for large groups before at church socials and school events, but never for men who worked this hard. They ate like they were starving, which maybe they were. "Ma'am," the young hand with the sunburned face said, "I don't know where you came from, but please don't ever leave." A few of the others laughed and nodded agreement. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. "What's your name?" she asked. "Billy, ma'am?" "Billy Tate." "Well, Billy, there's more biscuits if you want them." Billy's face lit up like Christmas morning. After the men left for the range, Clara started cleaning up. Pete appeared at her elbow, dish towel in hand. "Mr. Beckham says I'm to help you mornings before I head out," he said. "If that's all right with you." "It's more than all right." "Thank you, Pete." They worked in comfortable silence for a while. Then Pete spoke. "You did good, ma'am. The men liked you." "They liked the food." "Same thing, mostly." Pete grinned. "But it ain't just that. They can tell you're, I don't know how to say it, real, I guess. Not putting on airs." Clara scrubbed a pan harder than necessary. "I don't have any airs left to put on." "That's what makes you real, ma'am." She looked at the boy, really looked at him. He was young, but there was wisdom in his eyes that came from hard living. "You're pretty smart for 16, she said. Pete ducked his head. 14, ma'am. I just look older." 14. Clara's heart clenched. Just a child, really. A child who'd lost everything, and somehow kept going. "Pete," she said softly, "how did Mr. Beckham find you?" The boy was quiet for a moment. "I was stealing apples from his orchard. Figured he'd shoot me or call the sheriff. Instead, he sat me down and fed me dinner. Asked where my folks were." Pete's voice dropped. "When I told him they were dead, he just nodded. Said he knew what that felt like. Then he offered me a job." Just like that. Just like that. Pete met her eyes. "Mr. Beckham don't say much, but when he does, he means it. He gave me a home when nobody else would even look at me." Clara understood something then. Something about why she was standing in this kitchen, why Silas had hired her without references or proof of her innocence. He collected broken things, and somehow in his quiet way, he helped them become whole again. The morning passed quickly. Clara organized the pantry, and started preparing for the midday meal. She found the ranch's ledgers on a shelf and began reviewing them while bread rose on the counter. The numbers told a story. Silas Beckham wasn't rich, but he wasn't struggling either. His operation was solid, well-managed, careful. Every expense documented, every sale recorded. The handwriting was neat but cramped, like someone who found writing difficult but did it anyway because it needed doing. At the bottom of one page, she found something that made her pause. A list of names with amounts next to them. Small amounts paid out monthly. Those are loans. Clara looked up. Silas stood in the doorway, hat in hand. I didn't mean to pry, she said quickly. I was just reviewing. It's fine. You'll need to understand the books if you're keeping them. He walked to the table and sat down. Those are folks who needed help and couldn't get it from the bank. I loan them what they need. They pay back what they can when they can. Clara looked at the list again. Some payments were as small as 50 cents. Some names had no payments recorded for months. You're not charging interest, she said. No point. They're struggling already. Most lenders wouldn't see it that way. Silas shrugged. Most lenders are in it for profit. I'm in it because I remember what it felt like to need help and not find any. Clara closed the ledger. What happened when you needed help? His jaw tightened. For a moment she thought he wouldn't answer. After Mary died, he said finally, I lost myself for a while. Stopped working. Stopped eating. Stopped caring. The ranch nearly went under. It was Ruth Holloway who pulled me back. Showed up one day, told me I could lie down and die, or I could stand up and live. Said Mary wouldn't want me to give up. What did you do? I stood up. He met her eyes. Hardest thing I ever did. But Ruth was right. Lying down wasn't living. It was just dying slower. Clara thought about Philadelphia, about the months after the scandal when she'd wanted to disappear, to simply stop existing. She'd had no Ruth Holloway to pull her back. She'd had to find her own way to stand. I understand, she said quietly. Silas studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. I believe you do, Miss Sutton. The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken things. Then hoofbeats sounded outside. Silas was on his feet instantly, his hand moving toward the rifle mounted above the fireplace. Clara rose too, her heart suddenly pounding. Stay inside, Silas said. Who is it? Don't know yet. He grabbed the rifle and walked out onto the porch. Clara moved to the window, watching through the dusty glass. A single rider approached. A man in a dark suit riding a horse too fine for ranch work. He stopped about 20 feet from the porch. Mr. Beckham. The man's voice carried clearly. Good afternoon? Afternoon. Silas didn't lower the rifle. What brings you out here, Collins? Just delivering a message from Judge Cobb. Clara's blood turned to ice. I don't recall asking for any messages from the judge. Collins smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. The judge wants you to know that the woman you're harboring is wanted in Philadelphia for theft. He thought you should know the kind of criminal you've taken in. Is that so? It is. The judge is concerned for your welfare. A woman like that, she'll steal you blind and disappear before you know what happened. Silas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was flat and hard. You tell Judge Cobb I appreciate his concern, but I make my own decisions about who works on my land, and I don't take kindly to folks spreading lies about people under my protection. Collins's smile faltered. The judge won't be happy to hear that. The judge can be as unhappy as he likes, on his own property. This is mine. Silas lifted the rifle slightly. Now I believe you've delivered your message. Gates back the way you came. Collins stared at him for a long moment. Then he yanked his horse around and rode away without another word. Clara realized she'd been holding her breath. She let it out slowly as Silas came back inside. "He knows I'm here," she said. "He's known since yesterday. Small town, big ears." Silas set the rifle back on its pegs. "Collins is his lawyer, handles his dirty work. What will Cobb do now?" Silas turned to face her. His expression was calm, but his eyes were hard. "Whatever he thinks he can get away with. But don't worry, Miss Sutton. He can't touch you here." "You don't know that. I know Harlan Cobb. Known him for 20 years. He's a bully and a coward. He only attacks when he thinks he'll win. As long as you're on my land under my protection, he can't win." Silas paused. "Unless you want to leave." Clara straightened her spine. "I don't run from bullies, Mr. Beckham. Not anymore." Something shifted in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or something deeper. "Good," he said simply. "Now I believe I smelled bread baking when I came in." Despite everything, Clara laughed. "It's almost ready." "Then I'll wait." He sat down at the table, and she turned back to her work. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled the bread from the oven, but she steadied them. Judge Cobb knew where she was. But for the first time since Philadelphia, she wasn't facing her enemies alone. The next few days settled into a rhythm. Clara woke before dawn, cooked breakfast, cleaned, prepared lunch, reviewed ledgers, cooked dinner, cleaned again. The work was endless, but she found she didn't mind. There was satisfaction in it, in feeding hungry men, in keeping order in a place that needed her. The ranch hands accepted her quickly. Billy Tate became her unofficial taste tester, always lingering after meals to offer compliments. Gus told her stories about the old days while she mended shirts. Even the quieter hands nodded to her now, tipping their hats when they passed. But it was the small moments with Silas that she found herself waiting for. He came in for lunch when the other hands were still out on the range. They ate together, just the two of them, talking about the ranch, the weather, the price of cattle. Simple things. Easy things. One afternoon he asked about Philadelphia. "What was it like?" he said. "Teaching at that school?" Clara considered the question. "It was good, mostly. I loved the girls. They were bright, curious, eager to learn. Some of them came from families that didn't think education mattered for daughters. I tried to show them it did." "And the headmaster? The one who accused you?" Clara's hands stilled on the dish she was drying. "Richard Morehouse. He was—" She searched for the right words. "Charming at first. Everyone loved him. The parents, the board, the other teachers. He had a way of making you feel special, like you were the only person in the room. But it was all a lie. He'd been stealing from the school for years, skimming funds, falsifying records. When the board started asking questions, he needed someone to blame." Clara set down the dish. "I was convenient. The spinster teacher with no family, no connections, no one to defend her." "So he destroyed your reputation to save his own?" "Yes." The word came out flat. By the time the truth came out, it didn't matter. Everyone had already made up their minds about me. Silas was quiet for a long moment. "What happened to him?" "Morehouse." "Nothing. He resigned, quietly moved to another city, probably found another school to rob." Clara heard the bitterness in her own voice and tried to soften it. "That's how it works for men like him. They fail upward, while the people they hurt fall through the cracks." "Not always," Silas said. "Sometimes the truth catches up." "Do you really believe that?" He met her eyes. "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?" Clara didn't have an answer for that. That night she couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about Richard Morehouse and Judge Harlan Cobb. Different men, same kind of evil. Men who saw other people as tools to be used and discarded. She thought about Silas, too. About the way he looked at her when she spoke like her words actually mattered. About the quiet strength in his hands when he worked. About the pain he carried hidden behind silence and steady routine. She was falling for him. The realization hit her like a blow to the chest. She sat up in bed, pressing her hand over her racing heart. This was dangerous. This was foolish. She'd come to Texas to escape her past, not to complicate her future with feelings for a man she barely knew. But even as she told herself this, she knew it was already too late. Morning came too quickly. Clara dragged herself out of bed, exhausted from a sleepless night. She started the fire, put the coffee on, began mixing biscuit dough. The familiar motions calmed her. She was just pulling the first batch from the oven when the door burst open. Pete stumbled in, his face pale. "Ma'am, you need to come quick. There's trouble at the well." Clara wiped her hands and followed him outside. The morning air was already warm, carrying the promise of brutal heat to come. At the well behind the house, Silas stood with Gus and Billy. They were all staring into the depths. "What is it?" Clara asked. Silas turned to her. His face was grim. "Someone poisoned the well, threw in a dead coyote overnight. Water's no good now." Clara's stomach dropped. "Poisoned? But who would—" She stopped. She didn't need to finish the question. They all knew who. "Cobb," Gus spat. "Dirty, low-down snake." "Can't prove it was him," Billy said, though his voice held no conviction. "Don't need to prove it." Silas's jaw was tight. "I know." Clara stepped forward. "What do we do?" "The horses, the cattle, the men, they all need water." "There's a creek about 2 miles east," Silas said. "It's on my land, but it's a long haul. We'll have to ferry water until we can dig a new well or clean this one out." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe longer." Clara looked at the faces around her. Gus weathered and angry. Billy young and scared. Pete trying to be brave. And Silas carrying the weight of it all on shoulders that were already tired. "Then we start now," she said. "Tell me what to do." Silas looked at her for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Pete, hitch up the wagon. Gus, gather every barrel and bucket on the place. Billy, go tell the hands what's happened and get them organized." He turned to Clara. "You'll coordinate from here. Keep track of what we have, what we need, how long it'll last." "I can do that." "I know you can." The next hours were chaos. Clara stood at the center of it, directing traffic like a general on a battlefield. She tallied barrels, calculated consumption rates, figured out exactly how many trips to the creek they'd need each day to keep the ranch running. It was impossible math. The numbers didn't add up. Even working around the clock, they couldn't haul enough water. But she didn't tell anyone that. Not yet. By noon, the first wagon returned from the creek. The men were exhausted, drenched in sweat, but they unloaded the barrels without complaint. Clara had cold water and sandwiches waiting. The hands fell on the food like wolves. "How long can we keep this up?" Billy asked quietly, pulling her aside. "As long as we need to," Clara answered. "But ma'am, as long as we need to, Billy." He looked at her face and didn't argue. That evening, Silas found her in the kitchen, poring over the supply ledger. "You haven't eaten," he said. "I'm not hungry." "You need to eat." He set a plate in front of her. "Can't have you collapsing from hunger while you're trying to save my ranch." Clara looked up at him. He looked as tired as she felt, maybe more. Dust caked his clothes and sweat had dried in streaks on his face. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what? This. All of this. If I hadn't come here, Cobb wouldn't be attacking you." Silas pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. "Clara." It was the first time he'd used her name. The sound of it in his voice made her heart stutter. "This isn't your fault," he said. "Cobb has been looking for an excuse to come after me for years. We've got history, him and me. Bad history." "What kind of history?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "He wanted to buy this land. After Mary died, when I was drowning in grief and debt, he came to me with an offer. Said he'd take the ranch off my hands, give me enough money to start over somewhere else." "But you didn't sell." "Couldn't. This was Mary's dream, this ranch. She loved it more than anything. Selling it would have been like killing her all over again. His voice roughened. Cobb didn't take kindly to being refused. He's been looking for ways to hurt me ever since. So I'm just his latest weapon. No. Silas reached across the table and covered her hand with his. His skin was rough and warm. You're a person he thinks he can use. But he's wrong. You're stronger than he knows. Stronger than maybe you know. Clara stared at their joined hands. She should pull away. She should maintain distance, professionalism, safety. She didn't move. "Silas," she whispered. The door banged open. Pete burst in wild-eyed. "Mr. Beckham riders coming, a lot of them." Silas was on his feet instantly. "How many?" "8, maybe 10. Coming fast." Clara followed Silas onto the porch. In the fading light, she could see the dust cloud rising from the road. Hoofbeats thundered closer. "Get inside," Silas told her. "No." He turned, surprise flickering across his face. "I said I don't run from bullies," Clara said. "I meant it." For a moment she thought he would argue. Instead, he nodded once and turned back to face the approaching riders. They came in hard and fast, pulling their horses to a stop in a spray of dust. Judge Harlan Cobb sat at the front, flanked by Collins the lawyer and half a dozen men Clara didn't recognize. "Evening, Beckham," Cobb called. His voice was smooth, almost pleasant. "Heard you had some trouble with your well. Terrible shame." Silas said nothing. His hand rested near his hip, close to the pistol he wore. "I came to make you an offer," Cobb continued. "Neighborly concern, you understand. I know how hard it is to run a ranch without water. I've got plenty to spare. I'd be happy to let you use my creek for a fair price, of course." "I've got my own creek," Silas said flatly. "That little trickle 2 miles out, that won't sustain an operation this size. Not through summer." Cobb smiled. "Be reasonable, Beckham. I'm trying to help you." "The way you helped Miss Sutton, by leaving her stranded and spreading lies about her character?" Cobb's smile didn't waver, but something cold flickered in his eyes. "Miss Sutton is a criminal and a liar. I was protecting myself from a woman of low moral standing." Clara stepped forward before she could stop herself. "I am neither a criminal nor a liar, Judge Cobb, and you know it." Cobb's gaze landed on her. The coldness in his eyes deepened to something uglier. "You should watch your tone, Miss Sutton. A woman in your position can't afford to make more enemies." "She's not making enemies," Silas said. "She's standing up to one." The air between the two men crackled with tension. The hired men shifted in their saddles, hands moving toward their weapons. "This is your last chance, Beckham," Cobb said, all pretense of friendliness gone. "Sell me the ranch, or I'll make sure you lose everything." "Get off my land." "You're making a mistake." "I said, get off my land." Silas's voice was quiet, but it carried the force of a gunshot. Cobb stared at him for a long moment. Then he yanked his horse around and rode away, his men following in a cloud of dust. Silence settled over the ranch. Clara realized she was shaking. She pressed her hands together, trying to steady them. "He won't stop," she said. "He'll keep coming until he destroys you." Silas turned to her. In the dying light, his face was hard as stone, but his eyes were something else entirely. "Let him try," he said. "I've survived worse than Harlan Cobb." He walked past her into the house. Clara stayed on the porch, watching the last of the dust settle on the road. The battle lines were drawn now. There was no going back. She took a deep breath and followed Silas inside. The days that followed were the hardest Clara had ever known. Every morning before dawn, the men rode out to haul water from the creek. Every evening they returned exhausted, covered in dust, barely able to eat before collapsing into their bunks. The heat was relentless, pressing down on the ranch like a giant hand. And through it all, Judge Cobb watched and waited. Clara kept the books, tracked the supplies, calculated and recalculated the numbers that refused to add up. She cooked meals that stretched further each day as provisions ran low. She mended clothes, tended blisters, and held the ranch together with sheer stubborn will. But she couldn't hold back the whispers. They started in town, carried on the lips of people who had never met her. The scandalous woman from Philadelphia. The thief who had wormed her way into Silas Beckham's home. The shameless hussy, living under an unmarried man's roof. Ruth Holloway brought the news when she came to visit on the fourth day. "It's bad, Clara," Ruth said, settling into a chair at the kitchen table. "Cobb's been talking, loudly, to anyone who'll listen." Clara's hands stilled on the bread dough she was kneading. "What's he saying?" "That you seduced Silas to get access to his money. That you're planning to rob him blind and disappear just like you did in Philadelphia." Ruth's voice was heavy with disgust. "He's got half the town believing you're some kind of confidence woman. And the other half? The other half knows Harlan Cobb is a snake. But knowing and speaking up are two different things." Clara slammed her fist into the dough. "I'm so tired of this. I'm tired of being judged by people who don't know me, who've never even spoken to me. I know, honey, I know. What am I supposed to do? Go door to door and explain myself. Beg them to believe I'm innocent." Ruth was quiet for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was thoughtful. "There's a town meeting on Sunday, after church. Folks gather to discuss community business." Clara looked up. "You think I should speak? I think you should tell your truth, in your own words to their faces." Ruth met her eyes. "It won't convince everyone. Some people have already made up their minds, but the ones who are still deciding, they deserve to hear your side." Clara thought about standing in front of strangers, defending herself against lies. The thought made her stomach clench with fear. But she thought about Silas too, about everything he had risked for her, about the ranch struggling because of Cobb's vendetta. "I'll do it," she said. Ruth nodded, unsurprised. "I'll be there, so will some others. You won't be alone." After Ruth left, Clara sat at the table staring at her flour-covered hands. Her heart was racing, but beneath the fear was something else. Something that felt almost like relief. She was done hiding. Done being ashamed of a crime she didn't commit. It was time to fight back. Silas found her that evening sitting on the porch as the sun went down. He lowered himself onto the step beside her close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Ruth told me about the town meeting," he said. "She told you I'm going to speak." "She did." He was quiet for a moment. "You don't have to do this, Clara. You don't owe these people anything. It's not about what I owe them. It's about what I owe myself." Clara turned to look at him. "I spent months in Philadelphia hiding, hoping the scandal would blow over, hoping people would forget. They didn't. Hiding doesn't work, Silas. The only way out is through." He studied her face in the fading light. "You're braver than you know." "I'm terrified." "That's what makes it brave." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. She blinked them back. "Will you come to the meeting?" "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. They sat like that as darkness fell, not speaking, not needing to. Sometimes silence said more than words ever could. Sunday came too fast and not fast enough. Clara dressed carefully in her best dress, the blue one she had been saving for a special occasion. She pinned up her hair with trembling fingers and pressed her palms flat against the fabric of her skirt. "You look fine," Silas said from the doorway. Clara turned. He was wearing a clean shirt and his good hat. He looked almost handsome if you didn't count the worry lines around his eyes. "I look terrified," she said. "You look like a woman who's about to give the fight of her life." He crossed the room and took both her hands in his. "Whatever happens today, Clara, whatever they say, I want you to know something." "What?" "I believe you. I've believed you from the first moment you told me your story. And nothing anyone says is going to change that." Clara's breath caught. Silas. You don't have to say anything. Just know that when you stand up there, you're not standing alone. You've got me. You've got Ruth. You've got Pete and the hands and everyone else who's seen who you really are. He squeezed her hands. You're not the woman Cobb says you are. You're the woman who saved my ranch when it was falling apart. You're the woman who taught Pete to believe in himself again. You're the woman I... He stopped. His jaw tightened. The woman you what? Clara whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss to her knuckles. We should go, he said quietly. Don't want to be late. The church was packed. Clara had never seen so many people in one place. They filled the pews and lined the walls, standing shoulder to shoulder. The air was thick with heat and tension, and the smell of too many bodies in too small a space. Judge Cobb sat in the front row flanked by Collins and several men Clara didn't recognize. He looked calm, confident, like a man who had already won. Clara and Silas took seats near the back. Ruth was already there along with several women Clara had seen around town. They nodded to her small gestures of solidarity. The Reverend opened with a prayer, then turned the floor over to community business. For an hour, people discussed mundane matters, road repairs, the upcoming harvest festival, a dispute over property lines. Then Judge Cobb stood. If I may, he said, his voice carrying easily through the crowded room, there's a matter of some urgency I'd like to address. The Reverend hesitated, then nodded. Cobb turned to face the congregation. Many of you know that a stranger came to our town recently. A woman from Philadelphia who calls herself Clara Sutton. Clara felt every eye in the room turn toward her. She kept her face still. What some of you may not know, Cobb continued, is that this woman is a wanted criminal. She was dismissed from her position at a respectable school for stealing funds. She fled west to escape justice, and now she's attached herself to one of our own citizens, no doubt planning to rob him as she robbed her previous employers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Clara's hands clenched in her lap. I have documents, Cobb said, pulling papers from his coat. Newspaper articles from Philadelphia detailing her crimes. Letters from the school board confirming her dismissal. The evidence is clear. He handed the papers to the Reverend, who glanced at them with obvious discomfort. I move that we take action to protect our community, Cobb concluded. This woman should be escorted from town before she can do any more damage. The murmurs grew louder. Clara could feel the tide of opinion shifting, turning against her. Then Silas stood. I'd like to speak, he said. Cobb's eyes narrowed. This isn't your fight, Beckham. The hell it isn't. Silas walked to the front of the room, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. You're attacking a woman under my protection. That makes it my fight. Protection, Cobb laughed. Is that what you call it? Silas ignored the implication. I've known Harlan Cobb for 20 years. I've watched him buy up land from struggling families, cut off water supplies to ranchers who wouldn't sell, drive good people out of this valley through intimidation and lies. He turned to face the congregation. Now he wants you to believe he's protecting the community. He's protecting his own interests. That's all he's ever done. This is slander, Collins snapped. It's the truth, and everyone in this room knows it. The congregation shifted uncomfortably. Clara could see doubt creeping onto faces that had looked hostile moments before. Miss Sutton, Silas continued, came to this town through no fault of her own. She answered an advertisement, traveled 2,000 miles, and was abandoned at the station by the man who sent for her. That man, he pointed at Cobb, threw her away like garbage because he cared more about rumors than reality. She's a thief, Cobb shouted. She's innocent, Silas shouted back. The man who accused her was the real thief. He used her as a scapegoat to cover his own crimes. That's in the Philadelphia papers too, if you bother to read past the headlines. Clara rose to her feet before she realized she was moving. May I speak? The room went silent. Every face turned toward her. The Reverend nodded slowly. You may. Clara walked to the front of the church. Her legs felt weak, but she forced herself to stand tall. She looked out at the sea of faces, some hostile, some curious, some sympathetic. "My name is Clara Sutton," she said. "I was a teacher in Philadelphia for 6 years. I loved my work. I loved my students. And I was accused of a crime I didn't commit." She told them everything. The theft, the accusation, the investigation that cleared her name too late to save her reputation. She told them about selling everything she owned, about the hope she had felt boarding the train west, about the devastation of being abandoned by the man who had promised her a new life. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," she concluded. "I came here looking for a second chance. Mr. Beckham gave me that chance when no one else would. He offered me honest work and fair pay and treated me with respect. Whatever you think of me, whatever you believe about my past, that's the truth of who I am now." Silence stretched through the church. Then Ruth Holloway stood. "I believe her," Ruth said. "I've spent time with this woman. She's honest, hard-working, and kind. That's more than I can say for some folks in this room." Another woman stood. Mrs. Patterson. Clara remembered she ran the general store. "My daughter was sick last week. Miss Sutton walked 2 hours in the heat to bring her medicine and sit with her. That's not the act of a criminal." More people stood. Billy Tate. Old Gus. One by one, voices rose in Clara's defense. And then, unexpectedly, a woman in the front row stood. She was perhaps 50, with graying hair and tired eyes. Clara had never seen her before, but something about her face seemed familiar. "My name is Loretta Cobb," she said. "I'm Harlan's sister." The room went utterly silent. "I've kept quiet for too long," Loretta continued, her voice shaking. "I've watched my brother hurt people for years and said nothing because I was afraid. But I can't stay silent anymore." "Loretta, sit down," Cobb hissed. "No." She turned to face the congregation. "My brother didn't reject Miss Sutton because of some scandal in Philadelphia. He rejected her because she reminded him of someone he couldn't control, his first wife." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "She died, didn't she?" Loretta said, looking directly at her brother. "That's what you told everyone. But I know the truth, Harlan. I know she ran away. I know you spent years hunting her down. And I know what happened when you finally found her." Cobb's face had gone pale. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know everything." Loretta pulled a bundle of letters from her bag. "These are from Margaret, your wife. She wrote to me for years begging for help, begging me to tell someone the truth about the man she married." She handed the letters to the Reverend. His face went ashen as he read. "Harlan Cobb is not a protector of this community," Loretta said. "He's a predator. He's been using his power to hurt people for decades, and it's time someone finally stopped him." The church erupted into chaos. People were shouting, standing, pushing toward the front. Cobb tried to flee, but the sheriff, who had been standing quietly in the back, blocked his path. "Harlan Cobb," the sheriff said, "I think you and I need to have a conversation." Clara stood frozen in the midst of the chaos. She couldn't process what was happening, couldn't believe that after all the fear, all the struggle, the truth was finally coming out. Then Silas was beside her, his hand on her arm. "Come on," he said. "Let's get out of here." He led her through the crowd, out the church doors, into the afternoon heat. They didn't stop until they reached the wagon. Clara leaned against it, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." Silas cupped her face in his hands. "Not over," he said. "Just beginning." And then he kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative. Then her arms went around his neck and his arms went around her waist, and suddenly there was nothing soft about it. Years of loneliness, months of fear, weeks of longing, all of it poured into that kiss. When they finally broke apart, Clara was trembling. "I love you," Silas said. "I've been trying not to say it, trying to give you time, but I can't hold it back anymore. I love you, Clara Sutton." "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have since the moment you gave me a chance." He pulled her close, and she pressed her face against his chest, feeling his heartbeat steady and strong. Behind them, the church doors burst open and people streamed out, still talking, still shouting. The sheriff led Cobb away. Loretta stood alone, looking lost, but somehow lighter. Clara watched it all from the safety of Silas's arms. The war wasn't over yet. She knew that. Cobb had money, influence, connections. He wouldn't go down without a fight. But for the first time since she'd stepped off that train, Clara felt like she might actually win. The kiss changed everything and nothing. Clara rode back to the ranch beside Silas, her lips still tingling, her heart still racing. But even as joy flooded through her, a darker feeling crept in at the edges. Fear. Because men like Harlan Cobb didn't surrender quietly. They burned the world down before admitting defeat. "You're thinking too loud," Silas said. Clara glanced at him. "How can you tell? Your shoulders are up around your ears. You do that when you're worried." She forced herself to relax. "I'm thinking about what comes next. The sheriff took Cobb for questioning, but that doesn't mean he'll stay locked up. He has money, connections, a good lawyer. Collins. Yes, Collins will find a way to get him out." Silas was quiet for a moment. "Probably. But things are different now. People know the truth. Loretta's letters will be hard to explain away. Since when has the truth stopped a powerful man?" He didn't have an answer for that. They arrived at the ranch as the sun began its descent. Pete came running from the barn, his face alight with excitement. "Is it true?" he demanded. "What people are saying that Judge Cobb got arrested. He got taken in for questioning," Silas corrected. "That's not the same as arrested." Pete's face fell. "But he did bad things. Everybody heard. He can't just walk away, can he?" Clara and Silas exchanged a look. "We'll see, Pete," Clara said gently. "We'll see." That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the day's events. The church, the accusations, Loretta's devastating testimony, the kiss. She pressed her fingers to her lips, remembering the feel of Silas's mouth against hers, the strength of his arms around her, the words he'd spoken. "I love you." 3 words she'd never expected to hear again. 3 words she'd stopped believing she deserved. A soft knock came at her door. Clara sat up, her heart jumping. "Who is it?" "It's me. Silas." She rose and opened the door. He stood in the dim hallway, still dressed, worry etched into the lines of his face. "Rider coming," he said quietly. "Fast." Clara's stomach dropped. "Cobb." "Don't know yet. Get dressed. Stay inside until I come for you." He was gone before she could respond. Clara dressed quickly, her hands shaking. She could hear hoofbeats now, thundering closer. Voices outside. Silas's deep rumble, then another voice she didn't recognize. Minutes crawled by. Finally, Silas appeared in her doorway. His face was grim. "It's the sheriff," he said. "Cobb's gone." "Gone? What do you mean, gone?" "Collins posted bail 2 hours ago. By the time the paperwork cleared, Cobb had disappeared. Sheriff thinks he's heading for the county line." Clara felt the ground shift beneath her feet. "He's running. Or planning something." Silas stepped closer. "Sheriff wanted to warn us. Says we should be careful until Cobb's found." "Careful how? Lock ourselves in the house and hope he doesn't come back." "Clara." "No." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of waiting for the next attack. If Cobb wants a fight, then let's fight." Silas studied her face. Something shifted in his expression, not disapproval, but something else. Pride, maybe. "All right," he said. "Then we fight." They didn't have to wait long. The next morning, Billy Tate came riding in from the north pasture, his horse lathered and heaving. "Fire!" he shouted. "The grassland's burning." Clara ran outside. She could see it now, a dark smudge on the horizon growing larger by the second. Smoke billowed into the morning sky. Silas was already barking orders. "Gus, get the horses out of the corral. Pete, fill every bucket you can find. Billy, ride to town and get help." The ranch exploded into chaos. Clara worked alongside the men, hauling water, beating back flames, with wet blankets fighting the fire that seemed determined to devour everything in its path. The heat was unbearable. Smoke burned her lungs and stung her eyes, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop, because she knew who had set this fire, and she'd be damned if she let him win. Hours passed. Help arrived from town neighbors who had heard the news at church, who had seen Loretta's letters, who had finally understood what kind of man Harlan Cobb really was. They worked shoulder to shoulder, strangers and friends alike, united against a common enemy. By afternoon, the fire was contained. Clara collapsed against the side of the barn, too exhausted to move. Her dress was ruined. Her hair singed her hands, covered in burns and blisters. But the ranch was still standing. Silas found her there. He looked as battered as she felt, his face blackened with soot, his clothes torn and smoking. "We did it," he said, sliding down beside her. "We did it," she echoed. He took her hand, careful of her burns. "This isn't over, you know that." "I know. He'll come again, harder this time." Clara turned to look at him. "Then we'll fight harder." Something flickered in his eyes. He reached up and brushed a strand of hair from her face, leaving a smudge of soot on her cheek. "Marry me," he said. Clara's breath stopped. "What?" "I know it's not the right time. I know we're covered in ash and barely standing, but I don't want to wait anymore." His voice roughened. "Life's too short and too uncertain. I love you, Clara. I want you to be my wife." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, cutting tracks through the soot. "Silas, you don't have to answer now. You can take all the time you need, but I wanted you to know." "Yes." He stopped. "What?" "Yes, I'll marry you." Clara laughed through her tears. "You stubborn, wonderful man. Yes." He kissed her then, right there against the barn, both of them filthy and exhausted and happier than they'd ever been. The hands cheered. Pete whooped loud enough to scare the horses. Even Gus cracked a smile. But the celebration was short-lived. A rider appeared on the ridge, silhouetted against the smoke-darkened sky. Clara's blood ran cold. Harlan Cobb. He sat on his horse like a king, surveying conquered territory, watching the destruction he had caused. Even from this distance, Clara could see the satisfaction on his face. Silas rose slowly. His hand moved to the pistol at his hip. "Don't," Clara said, grabbing his arm. "That's what he wants. He wants you to lose control. He burned my land. And if you kill him, you'll hang for it. Is that what you want? To leave me a widow before we're even married?" Silas's jaw clenched, but he kept his hand away from his gun. Cobb watched for a long moment. Then he turned his horse and rode away, disappearing into the smoke. "Coward," Billy spat. "Setting fires and running." "He's not running," Clara said quietly. "He's waiting, testing us, seeing how far he can push before we break." "Then we don't break," Silas said. The days that followed were tense. The sheriff searched for evidence linking Cobb to the fire, but found nothing conclusive. Cobb himself had disappeared again, his ranch locked tight, his hired men scattered to the winds. But the threat lingered. Clara felt it every time she stepped outside, every time a horse appeared on the horizon, every time the wind shifted and brought the smell of smoke. She was living on the edge of a knife, waiting for it to fall. Silas felt it too. He barely slept, spending nights patrolling the ranch, checking fences, watching for signs of intruders. The strain was wearing him down. Clara could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You can't keep going like this," she told him one evening. "I can keep going as long as I need to." "Silas." She stepped in front of him, forcing him to stop. You're exhausted. You're going to make yourself sick. I'm fine. You're not fine. And neither am I. She took his hands in hers. We need help. We can't fight Cobb alone. Who's going to help us? The sheriff can't do anything without evidence. The townspeople have their own problems. The townspeople stood with us at the fire. They came when we needed them. Clara squeezed his hands. We're not alone anymore, Silas. But we have to ask for help. He was quiet for a long moment. I don't know how to do that. I know. Neither did I once. She smiled softly. But I learned. Let me teach you. The next morning they rode into town together. Clara went straight to Ruth's boarding house. Silas went to the sheriff's office. By noon they had assembled a group of allies, neighbors, business owners, ranchers, who had suffered under Cobb's tyranny and never had the courage to speak up. We all know what Harlan Cobb has done, Clara said, standing before the gathered crowd. We all have stories. Land he stole, water rights he bought with intimidation, lives he ruined because people were too afraid to fight back. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. But things are different now. His sister spoke the truth about him in church. His crimes are coming to light. If we stand together, if we share what we know, we can make sure he never hurts anyone again. And if he comes after us, someone called out. Clara met the speaker's eyes. Then we face him together. We're stronger united than divided. That's something Cobb never understood. The room was silent. Then Ruth stood. I'll testify. About what he did to his first wife. About the women who came to me over the years running from his cruelty. Another woman stood. I'll testify too. He drove my husband to suicide with his debts. I have the letters proving it. More people rose. More voices joined. By the time the meeting ended, they had gathered enough testimony to bury Harlan Cobb 10 times over. This changes everything, Silas said as they rode home. It only changes things if the law listens. The law will listen. He reached over and took her hand. You made them believe, Clara. You gave them hope. We gave them hope, she corrected. Together. The wedding was set for Saturday. It was a simple affair, no time for fancy dresses or elaborate preparations. Clara wore a white cotton dress that Ruth had helped her alter. Silas wore his best shirt, the one Clara had mended herself. The ceremony was held at the ranch under the wide Texas sky. The Reverend spoke words of love and commitment, while the ranch hands stood as witnesses and the summer wind carried the scent of wildflowers. When Silas said, I do, his voice was steady and sure. When Clara said, I do, her voice trembled with joy. They sealed their vows with a kiss that lasted longer than strictly proper. Nobody complained. The celebration afterward was modest cold chicken, fresh bread, and a cake that Mrs. Patterson had insisted on baking. The hands danced to music from Gus's battered harmonica. Pete spun Clara around until she was dizzy with laughter. For a few precious hours they forgot about fires and threats and the shadow that loomed over their happiness. Then the shadow returned. It happened just after sundown. Clara was helping clear the remains of the celebration when she heard hoofbeats. Too many hoofbeats. Coming fast. Silas! She called. He was already moving, shoving her toward the house. Inside. Now! I'm not leaving you. Clara, please. She heard the fear in his voice. Fear for her, not for himself. She ran inside. Through the window she watched riders pour into the ranch yard. A dozen men, maybe more. Armed and angry. Harlan Cobb sat at the front. Beckham! Cobb shouted. I know you're there. Come out and face me like a man. Silas stepped onto the porch. He had his rifle in his hands, but pointed at the ground. This is my wedding day, Cobb. You really want to do this now? I want what's mine. Cobb's voice was wild, unhinged. You took everything from me. My reputation, my standing. My own sister turned against me because of you and that whore you married. Watch your mouth. Or what you'll shoot me." Cobb laughed. "Go ahead. Give me an excuse to burn this place to the ground with you inside it." Clara's hand went to the pistol on the shelf, the one Silas had taught her to use. She checked the chambers with trembling fingers. "You're finished, Cobb," Silas said. "Half the county is ready to testify against you. The sheriff has enough evidence to put you away for years. Running isn't going to help." "I'm not running. I'm finishing what I started." Cobb raised his hand. "Boys tear this place apart." The riders started forward. Then another group of riders appeared. They came from the east, from the direction of town. Clara counted them through the window, 15-20 more. They surrounded Cobb's men, cutting off their escape. The sheriff rode at the front. "Harlan Cobb," he called out. "You're under arrest for arson, attempted murder, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Order your men to stand down, or I'll order mine to open fire." Cobb's face twisted with rage. "You can't do this. I own this county." "Not anymore." The sheriff's voice was cold. "Stand down. Now." For a terrible moment, Clara thought Cobb would fight. His hand moved toward his gun. His men tensed, ready for violence. Then one of them dropped his weapon. Then another. Then another. "Sorry, Judge," one muttered. "This ain't worth dying for." Cobb watched his army crumble. The rage in his face gave way to something else, something broken. "It's over, Harlan," the sheriff said quietly. "Let it end." Cobb sat frozen on his horse. Then slowly he raised his hands. Clara sagged against the wall. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. Silas burst through the door and caught her before she fell. He held her tight, his heart pounding against hers. "It's over," he whispered. "It's really over." Clara buried her face in his chest and wept. Outside, the sheriff's men led Harlan Cobb away in chains. The man who had terrorized this valley for decades, who had destroyed lives and stolen futures, who had tried to break a woman who refused to be broken. He looked small now, defeated. Clara watched him go and felt no triumph, only relief, only gratitude, only the overwhelming certainty that she had finally found the place where she belonged. Silas lifted her face and kissed her tears away. "Mrs. Beckham," he said softly. Clara laughed through her tears. "Mr. Beckham." "Welcome home." She pressed her forehead against his and closed her eyes. Home. After all these years, after all this pain. She was finally home. The weeks after Harlan Cobb's arrest were the strangest of Clara's life. Strange because for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid. She woke each morning beside a man who loved her in a house that had become her home, surrounded by people who had become her family. The constant knot of anxiety that had lived in her chest for so long began slowly to unravel. But healing wasn't simple. It never was. Clara learned this the night she woke screaming. The nightmare had been vivid, Cobb's face twisted with rage, fire consuming everything she loved, Silas falling, and her unable to reach him no matter how fast she ran. "Clara, Clara!" Silas's voice cut through the terror. His hands gripped her shoulders, steady and warm. "It was a dream," he said. "Just a dream. You're safe." She clung to him, her body shaking. "I saw him. He's gone. He can't hurt you anymore." I know that." She pressed her face against his chest. "But knowing doesn't stop the fear." Silas held her in the darkness, stroking her hair, murmuring words of comfort until her breathing slowed. "How long?" she whispered. "How long what? How long until I stop being afraid?" He was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. After Mary died, I had nightmares for years. Sometimes I still do." His arms tightened around her. "But they get easier, less frequent, and eventually you realize you've gone a whole week without one, then a month. Then you wake up one day and can't remember the last time the past came calling." Clara lifted her head to look at him. Even in the darkness, she could see the truth in his eyes. The pain he still carried, the scars that had healed but never quite disappeared. "We're both broken, aren't we?" she said softly. "We're both healing." He kissed her forehead. "There's a difference." Morning brought new challenges. The trial was set for the following month. Clara would have to testify along with Ruth and Loretta and a dozen others whose lives Cobb had damaged. The thought made her stomach clench, but she refused to let fear win. "You don't have to do this," Silas said at breakfast. "Yes, I do." Clara poured him coffee with steady hands. "If I don't speak up, others might stay silent too, and silence is how men like Cobb get away with things. You've already been through so much. Which is exactly why I need to see it through. For myself. For everyone he hurt." She met his eyes. "For us." Silas studied her face for a long moment. Then he nodded. "All right. But I'm going to be there. Every day. Every minute. I wouldn't have it any other way." The ranch demanded attention, even as legal matters loomed. Roundup was over, but summer's work continued. There were fences to mend horses, to train calves to brand. Clara threw herself into helping wherever she could, learning tasks she'd never imagined doing back in Philadelphia. Pete became her teacher. "No, ma'am, you gotta hold the reins looser. Like this, see?" He demonstrated his young face earnest. "Horses can feel when you're nervous. You gotta be calm, and they'll be calm too." Clara tried again. The mare beneath her shifted, then settled. "Better." Pete grinned. "You're a natural Mrs. Beckham." Mrs. Beckham. She still wasn't used to the name. "Pete," she said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Do you ever think about what might have happened if Mr. Beckham hadn't found you, if he hadn't taken you in?" Pete's face sobered. "All the time. I'd probably be dead by now. Or worse." He met her eyes. "Mr. Beckham saved my life. Just like he saved yours." "We saved each other," Clara said quietly. Pete nodded slowly. "I reckon that's true. That's how it works with family, isn't it? We take turns saving each other." Family. The word wrapped around Clara's heart like a warm blanket. "Yes," she said. "That's exactly how it works." 3 weeks before the trial, Loretta Cobb came to visit. Clara saw the wagon approaching and felt her stomach tighten. She hadn't spoken to Harlan's sister since that day in the church, hadn't known what to say. But Loretta wasn't here to cause trouble. "Mrs. Beckham." She stood at the edge of the porch, her hands clasped in front of her. "I hope I'm not intruding." "Not at all. Please come in." They sat at the kitchen table, two women with more in common than either had expected. Clara poured tea and waited for Loretta to speak. "I came to apologize," Loretta said finally. "Apologize for what? For taking so long, to speak up, to tell the truth." Loretta's hands trembled around her teacup. "I knew what my brother was. I knew for years, and I said nothing. You were afraid. That's not an excuse. Maybe not, but it's an explanation." Clara leaned forward. "You spoke up when it mattered most. You told the truth when it could have destroyed you. That took courage." Loretta's eyes filled with tears. "I keep thinking about all the people I could have helped if I'd just said something sooner. All the lives that were ruined while I stayed silent. You can't change the past, but you can help shape the future." Clara reached across the table and took Loretta's hand. "Testify at the trial. Tell the truth again in front of the judge and jury. Help make sure your brother can never hurt anyone else." "I'm going to." Loretta squeezed her hand. "I owe that much to everyone he wronged, including you." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything." Loretta met her eyes. "If you hadn't stood up that day in church, I never would have found the courage to speak. You showed me what bravery looks like." Clara felt tears prick her own eyes. "I was terrified." "That's what makes it brave." They sat together in silence, two women who had learned to stand when the world wanted them to kneel. The night before the trial, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the stars wheel overhead, trying to calm her racing thoughts. Tomorrow she would face a courtroom full of strangers. She would tell her story again and hope that this time justice would prevail. The bedroom door opened. Silas appeared, his hair tousled from sleep. "Come back to bed," he said. "I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see that courtroom, all those faces staring at me, judging me." He crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "Listen to me. Tomorrow, you're going to walk into that courthouse with your head held high. You're going to tell the truth, the same truth you've been telling since you got here. And when you're done, every person in that room is going to know exactly who Clara Beckham is." And who is that? A woman who survived things that would have broken most people. A woman who found the strength to start over when everything she knew was torn away. A woman who taught a lonely cowboy how to love again. He took her face in his hands. "You're the bravest person I've ever met, Clara. And tomorrow, you're going to prove it." She leaned her forehead against his. "What if they don't believe me? Then we appeal. We fight. We keep going until someone listens." His voice hardened. "But they will believe you. Because the truth has a weight that lies can never match." Clara closed her eyes. "I love you." "I love you too. Now come back to bed. You're going to need your strength." She let him lead her away from the window, away from the fear. Tomorrow would come. She would be ready. The trial lasted 5 days. 5 days of testimony, cross-examination, legal arguments that stretched on for hours. 5 days of sitting in that hard wooden chair while lawyers dissected her life and character. But Clara held firm. She told her story from the beginning. Philadelphia. The accusation. The train ride west. The man who abandoned her at the station. The stranger who took her in. "Mrs. Beckham," the prosecutor asked, "can you describe the moment you first met Silas Beckham?" "I was standing in Ruth Holloway's boarding house covered in dust, with nothing but a carpet bag and $3 to my name. Mrs. Holloway told me about a rancher who needed help. I walked 2 hours in the heat to find him." Clara's voice stayed steady. "He didn't ask me for references. He didn't demand proof of my innocence. He just looked at me and offered me a chance." "And what did you do with that chance?" "I worked. Harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I cooked, cleaned, kept books, mended clothes. I earned my place on that ranch." She lifted her chin. "I earned my place in this community." The defense lawyer tried to shake her. He brought up the Philadelphia scandal, suggested she had seduced Silas for his money, implied she had conspired to frame Harlan Cobb. Clara answered every attack with calm certainty. "I did not steal from the school in Philadelphia. I did not seduce Mr. Beckham. I did not conspire against Judge Cobb." Her voice rang through the courtroom. "I simply told the truth. And the truth is that Harlan Cobb is a bully, a thief, and a man who destroyed lives for his own profit." When she finally stepped down from the witness stand, her legs were shaking. But she had done it. She had said everything that needed saying. Silas was waiting in the hallway. He pulled her into his arms without a word. "It's over," she whispered. "Almost. Jury's still out." "How long?" "Could be hours. Could be days." He pulled back to look at her face. "You did good in there, Clara. Real good." "I just told the truth. That's all anyone can do." They waited. Hours stretched into a day, then 2. Clara paced the ranch house like a caged animal, too anxious to eat, too wound up to sleep. Silas stayed close, offering quiet support, but not empty reassurances. On the 3rd day, word came. The jury had reached a verdict. Clara and Silas rode to the courthouse together. The streets were packed. Everyone wanted to see how this ended. They pushed through the crowd and found seats near the front. Harlan Cobb sat at the defendant's table, his face gray and drawn. The arrogance that had defined him for so long was gone, replaced by something smaller, something defeated. The judge called for order. The jury foreman stood. On the charge of arson, how do you find Betty guilty? A murmur rippled through the courtroom. On the charge of attempted murder. Guilty. The murmur grew louder. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud. Guilty. Clara's hand found Silas's. She gripped it tight, hardly daring to breathe. The judge pronounced sentence. 20 years in the territorial prison. No possibility of parole. Cobb didn't react. He sat motionless as the bailiffs approached, as they pulled him to his feet, as they led him away in chains. Only at the last moment did he turn his head. His eyes found Clara's. She held his gaze. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. After a moment, Cobb turned and shuffled through the door. It closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid slamming shut. Clara let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. "It's over," she said. "It's really over." Silas pulled her close. "Yes, it is." The celebration that night was unlike anything Clara had ever experienced. It seemed like half the county had gathered at the ranch. Ruth brought 3 kinds of pie. Mrs. Patterson organized a potluck. Even Loretta came looking lighter than Clara had ever seen her. "Thank you," Loretta said, pulling Clara aside. "For everything. Thank yourself. You're the one who told the truth." "But you showed me how." Loretta embraced her briefly. "I'm leaving tomorrow. Going to visit my daughter in California. Start fresh somewhere new. Good luck." "You too, Clara. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The party lasted well past midnight. When the last guest finally left, Clara and Silas stood on the porch watching the stars. "What now?" Clara asked. "Now we live." Silas wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "We work the ranch. We build something good. We make up for all the time we spent just surviving." Clara leaned into him. "That sounds wonderful." "It does, doesn't it?" He was quiet for a moment. "Clara, there's something I need to tell you." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "I went to see the doctor in town last week. About Mary. About what happened when she—" He stopped, took a breath. "I asked him if it was safe for us to have children." Clara went very still. "What did he say?" "He said there's always risk, but Mary's death was caused by complications that aren't likely to repeat, if we're careful, if we have help nearby." Silas turned to face her. "I'm not saying we have to. I'm not saying I expect it. But if you wanted, yes." The word burst out of her before she could stop it. "Yes, Silas. I want that. I want a family with you." His face transformed. The fear and hesitation melted away, replaced by something bright and hopeful. "Really? Really?" She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "I want everything with you. The ranch, the work, the good days and the hard ones. I want to grow old watching our children run through these fields. I want—" He kissed her before she could finish. It was the kind of kiss that contained promises, futures, dreams that might actually come true. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Clara pressed her hand over his heart. "We're going to be all right, aren't we?" "Better than all right." He covered her hand with his own. "We're going to be happy." 1 year later, Clara stood at the same window where she had once watched Harlan Cobb ride away in chains. But the view had changed. The ranch was thriving. The well had been cleaned and restored. New fences lined the property strong and straight. Cattle grazed in the distance, fat and healthy. And in Clara's arms, a baby slept. "She's beautiful," Ruth said, peering over Clara's shoulder. "She looks like her father." "She has your eyes." Clara smiled down at the tiny face. Elizabeth Mary Beckham, named for Clara's mother and Silas's first wife. A bridge between past and future. Footsteps sounded on the porch. Silas appeared in the doorway, his face dusty from work, but his smile wide. "How are my girls?" "We're perfect." Clara crossed to him, baby Elizabeth cradled between them. "How's the roundup going?" "Pete's got it handled. Boy's turned into a real fine cowboy." Pride colored his voice. "We should think about making him a foreman soon." "He'd like that." Silas wrapped his arms around both of them, his wife and his daughter holding them close. "You know what I was thinking about this morning," he said quietly. "What?" "That day you showed up at my ranch, half dead from the heat, stubborn as a mule determined to earn your keep." He chuckled. "I thought you'd last maybe a week. I thought you'd throw me out by nightfall. Instead, here we are." Clara looked up at him, at this man who had given her everything when she had nothing, who had believed in her when the world wanted her destroyed, who had taught her that love wasn't just a feeling, it was a choice made new every single day. "Here we are," she echoed. Outside, the Texas summer stretched golden and endless. Pete rode past whooping at the cattle. Gus sat on the bunkhouse porch playing his harmonica. Billy Tate was courting the Patterson girl now, and everyone expected a wedding by fall. Life went on. Simple, hard, beautiful life. Clara thought about the woman she had been when she stepped off that train. Broken by scandal, abandoned by the man who promised her a future alone in a land she didn't know. She thought about everything she had survived, everything she had fought for, everything she had won. And she realized that the girl who left Philadelphia was gone. In her place stood Clara Beckham, wife, mother, rancher. A woman who had learned that the only approval worth having was her own. That family wasn't just blood, but choice. That second chances existed for those brave enough to claim them. Elizabeth stirred in her arms, making a soft sound of contentment. Clara kissed her daughter's forehead and looked out at the land that had become her home. This was her life now. Not the one she had planned, but the one she had built. Piece by piece, choice by choice, until the broken girl from Philadelphia had been remade into something stronger. Something whole. "Happy?" Silas asked. Clara smiled. "Yes," she said. "Finally, completely, yes." And standing there in the doorway of her home with her husband's arms around her and her daughter's heartbeat against her chest, Clara Sutton Beckham knew one thing for certain. She had traveled 2,000 miles to find where she belonged, and she was never leaving again.